Hi, folks. Lee Packett here, and you're watching Between the Lines, part of Fault Line's daily effort to take a look at the many cracks in America's criminal justice system. My guest today is Noel Erinjeri. He is a criminal defense attorney based out in Michigan, and he's also a contributor at Fault Lines. Noel, good to see you. Welcome back to the program.
Thank you. Good to see you, too.
So let's start off with, man, I'm really looking forward to getting into this story today. Tell me the story of Ed Sheehy.
So he was a public defender who was running for Supreme Court justice in Montana. And one of these outside groups spent, hundreds of thousands of dollars to make sure he didn't win. And the attack was basically that he was a lead attorney in a death penalty case, and that, by defending his client, they said he had activist values and he was unfit for the court and things like this. Based on, he was trying to defend his client. He claimed that the Montana death penalty statute was unconstitutional, all the things that defense attorneys do. And this outside group just dropped a bunch of money saying, because he did that, he's not fit for the court.
Right.
And it turned out the guys who were fronting the money for this organization were two very wealthy men who had lost a bunch of cases in the Montana Supreme Court, cases relating to water access on their private estates.
Right. Yeah, we're talking about billionaires here. Charles Schwab from that Charles Schwab that everyone knows, and James Cox Kennedy, chairman of Cox Enterprises, the media conglomerate. We're talking about very powerful men spending a lot of money, $650,000 in a race where, combined, Ed Sheehy and his opponent, they didn't even crack $100,000. I think they spent $44,000 and $35,000,
something like that,
respectively.
It might have been a little bit more when you count in the primary, but it was definitely like a multiple of whatever the candidates spent on their own.
So, what are people in Montana saying about this?
The whole thing about them being the donors didn't come out until a couple years later. The reason it popped back in the news is because the organization the Montana Growth Network, I guess they have a commissioner of political affairs or something like that. He filed charges, alleging improper violations, saying that they were producing ads, didn't disclose their donors, all that sort of thing.
Right. And as you pointed out, this happened, a couple of years ago now. What happened to Ed Sheehy since then? What's he working on now?
As far as I know, he's still with the public defender's office. So he went back to work. The other lady is on the Supreme Court. I looked, I couldn't figure out whether or not any of Schwab's or Kennedy's cases came back in front of him or how she voted.
Yeah, so life goes on, but man, this is such a weird story that just doesn't sit well with me at all. Why in 2016 in America are we still holding elections for judges? Can you talk to us a little bit about this?
Yeah, so my understanding is that the reason that we started electing judges goes back. I haven't checked this out myself. This is something I read about, but supposedly it goes back to like the 1840s and 1850s when judges in the North were enforcing the Fugitive Slave Act, which was unpopular in the northern states, and so they started electing judges because they wanted to basically, have some say over that particular thing. So it seems like they were doing the wrong thing for the right reasons. Obviously, capturing fugitive slaves and returning them to the South was morally wrong, but apparently that was a law. But that was a law of the land at the time. And so, yeah. So now you have the situation where judges are subject to political pressures when they should not be.
Right, and they have to go through the process of campaigning, in a day and age post-Innocent United where you have the ability to dump enormous amounts of money into these races, which I feel distorts, our legal process just a little bit further. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about is, this continuing trend that we're seeing where all of a sudden it's fair game for a lawyer running for office, whether it's a judge or any other position in the political spectrum. The clients that they worked on the behalf of, previously in their professional career, all of a sudden now that's fair game and somehow, valid grounds to impugn the character of that candidate for office. It's a pet peeve that just kind of drives me nuts.
Me too.
Why do you think that something like this is allowed?
I think it's just a cheap shot. It's easy to, you're running in a competitive race. It's easy to just find the worst client that person's ever represented and smear them with whatever mud you can throw at the wall.
Right.
And in my opinion, the worst thing is that people fall for it. You've got this army of people who watch Nancy Grace and who watch all the, all these shows like that. And, the defense attorney is always sleazy, always the bad guy. The prosecutor is always in the right. Excuse me. Um, and if people aren't willing to think critically about, hey, what exactly is a defense attorney supposed to be doing? And, think about like, well, their duty is to defend their client no matter what they're accused of doing or what they've done for that matter. And if, people don't have that level of basic knowledge, I mean, it's a small wonder that, elections can be swayed that easily.
Yeah, it's just a cultural phenomenon that I find, really, really difficult to process and vexing at the same time, because it runs counter to so much about pertaining to the way this country and its legal system is supposed to operate. Everyone's supposed to be entitled to a defense, no matter how bad a person they might be. Lawyers represent their clients without necessarily agreeing with what their clients did morally or on ethical grounds. Yet, election after election, I mean, this is something, even in the presidential election that we're facing in 2016, we're talking about who Hillary Clinton represented, 30, 40 years ago. I'm just having a hard time understanding why our culture is like this.
My guess is because it just seems like there's this entire industry devoted to keeping people outraged, and keeping them, as ignorant as possible of what actually goes on in the legal system. Like every time that there's some kind of high-profile case, like the Casey Anthony case, I guess it would be one example, where, people are so pissed off about it. But I mean, I guess what people don't realize is that, the prosecutor went to the jury on a murder case without knowing, like, what the cause of death was. They just kind of assumed, I mean, like, their chain of logic was basically, well, she's a
someone must have done it.
So she must have killed her.
Right.
Without saying, how she died or where she died or the means of death or anything like that. And, there's Nancy Grace was especially bad in that particular case, but there's an entire media advertising driven thing where, they're trying to come up with the most outrageously, I guess outraging would be a better word, the most outraging headlines possible to drive clickbait, to drive advertising. And it has nothing to do with actually appreciating the legal system for what it's supposed to be. And, whatever, TV is TV. When it bleeds over into elections, that's a bad thing. And when it bleeds over into judicial elections, that's even worse, because, I mean, in my opinion, we shouldn't be electing judges anyway. But if we're going to elect them, then judges are supposed to be non-political. And if you're going to play these sorts of political games, I mean, we all lose out on that, I think.
So you think this is a newer trend?
Newer in the sense that maybe in the last like 10 or 15 years, I guess. I don't know if stuff like this happened, 50 or 75 years ago. I couldn't tell you. But yeah, I definitely think that, it's more pronounced now. I'm noticing it more now. Put it that way.
Yeah, well, we live in interesting, dangerous, and scary times. Noel, thank you for your time today, sir.
No problem. Thank you.
That's Noel Erinjeri, contributor to Fault Lines. If you'd like to see more of the stuff we're working on, be sure to go check us out online. You can find us at mimesislaw.com under the Fault Lines tab. We're also on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. If you're listening to us as a podcast, do us a favor and give us a good review on iTunes. It makes all the difference in the world. If you're watching us on YouTube, do me a favor and subscribe to the channel. There's more good stuff coming. I'm Lee Pacquiao. Thanks for watching. See you next time. 2016, why are we still adopting a zero-tolerance approach in school systems around the country, particularly when, inside this same building, presumptively in Brighton, Colorado, you would have 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds, and 5-year-olds. These are totally different things. I mean, did the 5-year-old even know why she was being suspended?